Welcome to this webinar on ethical AI in marketing. My name is Bas Donkers and I'm a professor of marketing research at the Erasmus School of Economics. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars that we are organizing. There are many reasons for setting up these webinars, but let me highlight the two most important ones. First, we feel it's extremely important that universities share their knowledge and the knowledge of the people in their networks with people in the field. So welcome all to this webinar. Having a webinar like this provides us with an easy and convenient way of sharing our knowledge with you. The second reason is that we are launching a fully online master program on marketing and data intelligence, where we go into much more depth on the topics that we will discuss in these webinars. These webinars serve as a teaser for this program. I will tell you a bit more about the program towards the end of this webinar. Then I should of course motivate the topic that we are discussing today, which is ethical AI in marketing. But it just seems so enormously obvious to me that this is an important topic that it's difficult for me to make this very specific. Both the AI landscape and the use of AI within marketing is evolving so rapidly that it's difficult to take a step back and reflect on what we are doing, how we are doing it, and so on. At the same time, it's extremely important that we take this moment of reflection. Because if you don't, you might find yourself doing things you might not be so happy with in the end. In this webinar, we will ask some of the difficult questions, unfortunately not always with an answer to them. But we will also provide you with a detailed example on how these challenges can be managed. And we do this for a use case where we implement something as simple as a chatbot. I'm not going to give a long lecture here today. Developing the online program has taught me that that's not an intelligent way to spread knowledge. So with me today are Alicia Colijn and Martijn de Jong. Alicia is a former graduate of our university who is now continuing her education as a PhD student. But she's also actively involved in Code Europe, an important advocacy platform. But Alicia will explain a bit more about the activities of that platform herself. Martijn de Jong is a professor of marketing and a dear colleague of mine. He has worked actively on privacy and privacy-preserving research methods, and his current research focuses on using large language models for silicon sampling. He also is working on a very large project where he's implementing a chatbot, and today he will share some of the challenges, but also, fortunately, some of the solutions they found in making and doing this in a very ethical way. So, as I said, welcome, a warm welcome to Martijn and Alicia. And I'm happy to give the floor to Alicia to kick off and setting the stage from a more legal perspective on how we should and can think about AI in a marketing context.
Thanks, Bas, both for the introduction and the invite. And before anyone is shocked by the enormous piece of text that's now in screen, I just want to quickly introduce that I want to take you on what's like the important things that are happening from a regulatory perspective and what's important for marketers to know from both an AI and ethical lens. So if you look at what we have now in terms of regulation and lawmaking, one of the most important articles is Article 5 and then specifically paragraph 1 sub A of the AI Act, which is into force already. And if you look at this very large piece of text, there are a few things I want to highlight, which are that it's a prohibition for subliminal techniques or purposefully manipulative or deceptive techniques that would appreciably impair the ability to make an informed decision or a decision that consumers would otherwise not have taken in a manner that could cause significant harm. And I think already if we look at subliminal techniques or purposely manipulative or deceptive techniques, we know that the whole discussion around manipulations versus nudging in marketing is, I think, about 50 to 60 years old right now. So that adds the introduction of AI definitely adds a different dimension to this discussion, and to introduce why it might be a bit difficult for marketers that this legislation is in piece, I want to introduce kind of a short scenario. So imagine you're the marketing manager of a big FMCG company. Your manager tells you to do whatever you need to increase sales from the newest candy bars. And from analyzing your customer base, you know that the majority of your current sales are to children aged 12 to 16 from low-income households, and your educated guess is that they struggle with obesity. You're considering to test an AI system that tracks eye tracking, that uses eye tracking to design your new ad. And then the question is this responsible use of AI? And to start here on the table, but if people at home have opinions or questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well. But asking you first, would this be responsible use of AI?
Yeah, to the audience, I will get the questions here on my tablet, so I will bring them into the discussion. But this is, of course, questionable, and the difference between responsible and legally permitted are, I think, responsible is a much broader term. A lot of companies claim that the law is their boundary and everything within is fine. I think responsible companies are a bit more careful than abiding the law. So I think it's obviously questionable whether this is responsible, whether this is legal. Then indeed you have to interpret the law, and that's going to be a challenge in itself, I guess. So at the same time, there's some strange assumption in this law as well. Focusing on it impairs a decision from a consumer. But I've done a lot of consumer psychology, and consumers are always impaired. So it kind of says you're not, or it suggests that you're not allowed to make or help the consumer make impaired decisions. But if they're always impaired, then we have to meet the framework changes a lot, and even things that might not impair them, if they are already impaired, they might still be influenced by wrong information. And
what's more than reasonably impaired, so to say.
Yes, people smoke and cognitively know that they shouldn't do it. Then how can we say that decisions are rational, or that we can say objectively this shouldn't play a role, so it's fair. But if it's effectively does, because they were already impaired, it doesn't hurt them more. So if you take the responsible perspective, you might indeed maybe even take a step further than the law, where you say, okay, if I just see a TV commercial, people rationally know that this is something where I intend to influence their behaviors. So if they are cognitively capable enough, they will simply delete the information of the commercial after they've watched it, which people cannot.
My main concern lies primarily also with the age group. So young children, I think they're cognitively less developed, of course. And so the question is, can they resist also, for instance, these ads for candy bars? At the same time, I know that a lot of people in the industry, they always counter by saying that there's a moment of indulgence for everybody. So if you've worked hard, sometimes you want to treat yourself a little bit, right? And so the CEO of Jamin, which is a candy store here in the Netherlands, once talked about the candy jeweler. And so sometimes, you want to treat yourself a little bit. So to kind of forbid people from buying candy bars is also a bit extreme.
Yeah, that wouldn't make me happy either. Complete prohibition of candy bars. But that immediately already touches upon, I think, a few of the super relevant aspects that are touching upon the prohibition that is in the AI Act. I don't know if we've...
Let me see if Mathilde is providing me some input. No, I don't see any questions yet.
Then we'll just shortly continue. Feel free to still share things in the chat. We can always touch upon it later. But to run through a few of the aspects, we see that indeed the age group, 12 to 16, is it easier to impair their ability to make decisions than when it would be an adult group, could be. The second is if you sell candy bars to a group that struggles with obesity, can we say that that is significant harm? And thirdly is an eye tracking system. Is that a subliminal technique? As Bas said in the introduction, unfortunately, we don't always have answers because the European Commission is currently developing the AI strategy, which also involves guidelines on how the AI Act should be interpreted and where the guidelines should be and the prohibition should be. We do know that they intend to put the bar for significant harm quite high. So there is a probability that selling candy bars to a group with obesity won't be causing significant harm. But over the years, we've seen also that, for example, with the prohibitions on tobacco, on alcohol, that this is something that's changing as well. Seeing also 2 of the municipalities in the Netherlands who intend to prohibit advertisement for things that promote the use of fossil fuels. So, for example, the airlines. So we see that that's a kind of a changing guideline. So it's something to be aware of and something to be involved in my opinion, which then also touches upon why should a marketer be involved with ethics? Why should they be aware of ethics? And what role plays the rapid rise of AI in that? And that's immediately, according to research by McKinsey, AI is the field that, in terms of business fields, will change most drastically from the rise of AI. And that then means that the marketer is operating in a much more complex stakeholder field. So previously, where they would be operating together with content managers or advertisement agencies, they now also have to talk to people who speak a vastly different language, like data scientists, data engineers, AI strategists, and the question is, how do you work together towards a responsible marketing field that's driven by AI if the 2 groups speak such a different language?
Yeah. And this new program, which is about marketing and data intelligence, actually tries to build this bridge where you kind of at least learn to speak a bit the language of the data scientist and understand a bit how models work, but also get the relevant marketing questions and try to at least be able to bridge these 2 domains, or in many companies even those 2 silos that force you, where indeed the challenging part will indeed be about making sure that what the data scientist is doing when used by a marketer is still proper use, and the best performing model might build on unethical principles. So you have to communicate back, okay, this is what I used.
And that's immediately touching upon, like, getting more into my own background. I graduated from data science and marketing analytics in 2020 and worked in the field for 3 years before I returned to a PhD position. So I can say that that's definitely one of the biggest challenges, was to start translating, so to say, from the analysts to the marketers. And I found it so interesting. I decided to do an entire PhD on it. So I guess that says something. And I think the third point on why touching upon marketing and ethics is the rise in legislation. Like we just said, there is legislation that is coming into action, but there's also a reason to expect that this is going to only happen more. And
I see questions coming in, and a similar question from Ari and from Vanessa Abel. So is it the age or the method that is the critical factor here? And then Vanessa makes the question a bit more specific. If eye tracking is really meant to subliminally steer behavior that would exploit the vulnerability of this specific group, and would it not be categorized as an unacceptable risk, both legally and ethically?
Yeah, so if I can go back to the slide with the details. So without the AI system, there wouldn't be a prohibition. So if you don't use the AI system, it's not a prohibition. So that's, I think, answering the first question, is it the system or the vulnerable population? It starts with the system to kind of activate the article of the act. But you also, it is an adding of different parts that make it prohibited. So the vulnerable population is part of that. We can reasonably expect 12 to 16-year-olds to make less cognitive decisions than 28-year-olds.
The behavior of my daughter tells me, confirms that. But then you even see that you really have to be in control of your full marketing pipeline, because if you have this nice AI-generated TV commercial that Coca-Cola made, at that point, then at the end of the process, you bring in AI and you have to work back the whole
that's kind of
step.
the difficulty with the fact that the EU decided to use the words manipulative or deceptive, because in academic literature, we kind of have agreed on definition of manipulation or deceptive situations, but it always involves a one-to-one situation. And a marketer never works in a one-to-one situation. They always work in a one-to-many situation. So the fact that we don't have a definition yet of what constitutes manipulation or what constitutes deceptive techniques makes the interpretation of this article right now super difficult. Luckily, the European Commission is on it, and they are developing guidelines, but it is, even in literature, we haven't figured out what would be in a one-to-many situation. Kind of what would be manipulative or deceptive, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are some laws like discounts have to be measured relative to a price level that is observed in the past. And so,
and of course, depending on channels, you can make a reasonable, educated guess on who's there and when they would expect things to be manipulative, but it's still a guessing game.
Yeah.
So how do you link this to persuasion? Of course, many marketers try to persuade consumers to do something. So how are manipulation and persuasion actually linked? When
you have this saying, I think it's by Kotler, who says marketing is the art of persuasion with a swift swirl of manipulation.
Right.
So in literature, we regularly say it is manipulation if it is if I do something that makes you make a choice that you would otherwise not have taken. Okay. But yeah, when is that the case? I think that's the whole discussion on manipulation and nudging. Where's the line? Mm-hmm. But now the AI Act has drawn attention back to that discussion and made it more relevant again.
And how do you look at this? To me, the limits or the constraints that we impose on AI are way more tougher for AI than for humans.
Yeah.
So humans are allowed to do all these things, and as soon as we use AI, then it becomes illegal. For self-driving cars, self-driving cars could be safer than a lot of humans driving. We might impose a law that says after the age of 75, you should be driving a self-driving car instead of driving yourself, and that might be better, but somehow the threshold for self-driving cars has to be almost perfection, and here it feels a bit the same. Is this a way to preserve human labor?
Ooh, I don't know. You'd have to ask commission members, but I think one thing it definitely targets is the fact that maybe self-driving cars are safer. I must say I'm not aware of the latest statistics, but we also have this thing that humans can easily fall into automation bias, which means we kind of trust systems more than we trust other people. And you don't want that always to happen. I think why they do it in terms like these is that there are so many biases and technical risks that a system could fall into if the main assignment is to persuade people into buying and to optimize revenue. If that's the main target of a system, there are a lot of ways that it is very hard to program ethics and morals into it, which is why I think the European stance right now is to always have a human in the loop, which also holds for AI systems.
And is then allowed if so I have this optimization function, and then AI thinks of something, and the human says, "Okay, I think this is ethically valid," and then the human can make a mistake, or
doesn't make a moral when the when the marketer says it's fine.
Yes.
I think the thing about morals and ethics in general is that it's not a black and white thing. So already, like, we might have 3 different standards of morality or what would be responsible. So would it be fully responsible? Probably not. But probably there is no golden standard for responsible use, which is, I think, why it is so important for marketers to draw on their personal set of values and to get back into, bring back ethics and bring back also, the values that are important besides revenue and conversion, so to say. I think looking at time,
we have to move on.
I'll round up. To quickly say something about that, this is one of the things that we do with ENCODE. I'm active in both ENCODE the Netherlands and ENCODE Europe, which are organizations that we're a global organization that aims to draw attention to the human-centric development of AI. In case there is anyone at home that is still under 35, because we're a youth-led movement, then feel free to apply to become involved in the Netherlands or any other European country. And if you want to have more information, feel free to search my name on LinkedIn or somewhere. You can probably find me.
Yes. So thank you, Alicia. I think to outside this meeting have a discussion also on what would be good reflection cases like the one you had there, to let students indeed reflect on, okay, what are my moral boundaries? Where do I think that we should discuss this online or not? To help our students activate their own set of values and to establish and create awareness of them. A lot of people might not be fully aware there.
No.
So thanks a lot. A lot of challenges there, and fortunately, my colleague Martijn also can provide us with some solutions, or at least a process that might give to a constructive result. So Martijn, please go ahead and tell us something about your experiences.
Thank you for giving me the floor. So indeed, I would like to tell you a little bit today about the safeguarding journey that I've been undergoing the last year and a half. So as everybody, I guess, who is excited about AI, we had the idea to launch an AI chatbot in this religious context. So I'm Catholic myself. And so I work with this organization called DeoQuest. They have a large database with questions and answers, and they wanted to create a more interactive format by using also a chatbot for their users, which is basically the young generation. So I teamed up with them to actually develop this. And so initially, I did not have too much of an eye, I guess, for all of the things that are involved in safeguarding. So I worked also with a partner in Hungary. So I have the definition of digital safeguarding here on this slide. So this partner in Hungary is called Hintalova Expat, and they work a lot with young people. And so they provided me also with the following definition of digital safeguarding. So it refers to the measures, policies, and practices designed to protect individuals, especially children, young people, and vulnerable populations from harm, abuse, exploitation, or risks in online environments. It involves fostering a safe and responsible use of technology while empowering individuals to navigate the digital world confidently and securely. Of course, this is quite a mouthful. There are multiple components in this. So what are now sort of these underlying principles that are relevant for digital safeguarding? So the first point I would say is do no harm. While this may sound obvious, I also understand that a lot of businesses have commercial pressure. They need to make profits. They want to be maybe the first to market with a certain innovative product. And so then sometimes the safety or the well-being of the users could be seen as a secondary factor instead of as a primary factor. So even though this may sound obvious, again, as I said, there may sometimes be incentives that lead people to sort of forget about this a little bit. The second, of course, is that you have to be aware of potential risks. And these risks may vary from context to context. So for banks, there could be, for instance, serious compliance risks if these chatbots make mistakes. But for, say, a religious chatbot, again, you have different types of risks. For instance, where people become emotionally dependent on such a companion chatbot, or whether they're not able to separate, for instance, roles that a priest would normally fulfill versus, say, an AI bot. They could also maybe share personal data that's very sensitive, so you also have to be careful with that. Then there's this component of prevention. So rather than using a breakneck speed to introduce some new AI product on the market and trying to fix problems after launch, it is often a good idea to proactively address online safety concerns and to create a safe and online environment for the users. Then the fourth component has to do with empowerment. So you basically want to empower your users to make informed choices about their online behavior. So that, for instance, could mean that you educate them a little bit about the capabilities and also the limitations of these AI systems, to train them a little bit in AI literacy. What to do, for instance, when they encounter inappropriate content. Who could they contact? How should they respond? Should they seek help, etc. So you basically also want to communicate actively with your users about these types of issues. And then finally, of course, it is a good idea to do this not alone, but to work collaboratively with various stakeholders, such as technology companies, law enforcement, and community organizations, to address these online safety challenges effectively. So then, if you sort of plot a road towards digital safeguarding, there are several steps that are involved. So a first step is to make safe and smart choices about your digital solutions. So for us, for instance, it already started with which foundation model, so that is which base large language model to use. Do we use an open source model with maybe fewer privacy or with fewer safety guardrails? Or do we use a more sophisticated one, say by OpenAI or by Anthropic? All of these different large language models have slightly different characteristics. So especially, for instance, the model Claude has been developed with a lot of ethical standards in place. And so, yeah, these design choices are relevant. And of course, there are difficult trade-offs there as well, because sometimes these models are more expensive than other models. So cost, accuracy, safety, yeah, there are all sorts of aspects that you have to trade off here. Then, of course, an important step is to educate yourself and your partners. So this is an organization-wide exercise, I would say. So it's not enough that just a few people, say a digital safeguarding officer, knows about these issues, but I think everybody in the organization should be aware of this. So it's like a culture almost, where you equip yourself with the knowledge and the tools of digital safeguarding. So you need to have a policy, training also when you onboard new employees, and so on. Then you have the step of ongoing risk assessment. So risk can vary, of course, over time, but you need to be aware of all the possible risk factors, and also you need to then develop strategies to mitigate these possible risks. Audience can differ. So we work a lot with young people. And so for these young people, there are different types of risks than maybe for, say, older people or people in other industries. So the audience is also an important component to consider when you're designing these digital safeguarding policies. And then finally, this aspect of empowerment is something that I just already talked a little bit about. So it's important to provide support and guidance to people, and also to regularly review and adjust your policies if this is necessary based on feedback and review of the system as it goes live. So as we were drafting this safeguarding policy, a few things became apparent. So first of all, this policy needs to be written in a clear and accessible language. You could even have two policies, one for internally within your company, and then another policy that you communicate externally to the users that is, for instance, more simple. It could be in the form of an infographic or an easy video that people could process, and so on. The policy needs to be consistent with relevant legislation. As we've heard from Alicia, there are lots of different laws that you have to comply with. So you need to have a good eye on all the latest legislation. And then also, this is a live document. So this is not something that you do once in a static form and then you forget about it. But you have to regularly review and update these documents to reflect changes in the underlying technology and also best practices that you would see in, say, other companies in your industry or in your sector. And then also, I would like to talk a little bit more about a participatory approach where you empower the target audience. So in our chatbot development, we've actively involved the users quite a bit. So for instance, we've asked them to write questions that they potentially think are interesting. So we crowdsourced questions. We also involved them in red teaming, where we let them test the chatbot, try to make the chatbot do bad things, for instance. And also on the design of the interface, etc. So we involved them a lot. And here on this slide, you see a lot of different definitions from sort of a relatively minor level of involvement of young people to a relatively high level of involvement where things are user-led. So the definition of a user-led process is that users initiate or inspire the work and play a leading role in directing decision-making and implementation. Whereas, for instance, the opposite would be consultation, where you only consult users, but you basically make all the decisions yourself. So I think our model was the one of collaboration because we still wanted to maintain some control. But nonetheless, if you think that you understand the young generation without involving them, you're probably making a serious mistake because they probably speak a different language, have different ways of thinking. And so I think with any type of chatbot that you develop for a specific audience, it is very important also to involve the audience that it is for in the design process of this chatbot, rather than only relying on, say, technical engineers who develop this without carefully thinking it through. And then finally, the aspect I would like to mention is this aspect of communicating the safeguarding policy. So, for instance, what you could do is that you create a user-friendly version. I already mentioned this on one of the previous slides with visual elements. You could communicate the safeguarding policy also during the onboarding process, where you integrate the policy summary into, for instance, welcome emails or in user guidelines. Then you can publish it on the platform that you're using. So this could be in an app or a website. And then on top of that, you can run some direct engagement sessions where you, for instance, have short briefings or Q&A sessions live with your user communities. Finally, it is good to share periodic reminders so that it is, again, not just a single shot endeavor, but rather something that you repeat over time so that you constantly keep communicating to the users their responsibilities and their rights so that they're well aware of basically what they do. So this is more or less a sketch of the process that we have been going through, resulting in a digital safeguarding policy document, an implementation document, that needs to be signed also by everybody who's involved in our organization. So that would be volunteers, staff, etc. Again, so a culture of digital safeguarding rather than only a responsibility of one single individual.
That sounds like a very clear and extensive policy process. And I think it also is a nice way to get a well-supported, well-thought-through set of documents. Also, in your context, and there I'm curious to see how you see this move to a more commercial context. You have a lot of involvement from end users in the process, and I can imagine that they are also interested in making this happen. How do you see this translate to a company who wants to have their customer service automated in a chatbot?
So I think really the design of the chatbot is quite industry specific, as I mentioned before. So there are in the religious ecosystem also chatbots that are commercial, right? For which you have to pay, say, $50 or $60 or so per year. So I think even within this domain, there's a distinction between sort of free chatbots versus chatbots that are paid for. And of course, it makes sense that you have to pay for them. Otherwise, there's no business model, right? Because using LLMs costs money, normally speaking. So other sectors, it depends. So for instance, if you look at banks, they have a lot of other risks like reputational risks and compliance risks. So a big brand like a bank, if things don't work very well with their lending processes or with the details and the terms and the conditions of the financial products that they're offering, there are huge risks here, right? Because that will also trigger regulatory scrutiny if they don't do that well, right? So banks are very tightly regulated. Now, the example that you gave, for instance, where you have more, say, a standard company that's not in the financial sector or not in sort of the religious context. I still think that safeguarding there is very important too. You would have to carefully map out all of the possible risks that they would be exposed to or that their users would be exposed to. So again, this thing that I've just discussed is a process, right? It's not so much of a solution per se for one type of application. It's just every process is different in that sense, but you just need to have a sequence of steps that you need to go through in order to do this well. And for instance, I would still argue that for those companies too, it is probably smart to have, say, customer oversight bodies where also some customers are involved in sort of the design or in the evaluation or the feedback of these systems. Because again, you might run the risk of making assumptions about your target audience without involving them actively. And so I think this can be dangerous.
Yeah. I think more and more companies do have some sort of user panels, but I think one learning from what you've just taught is to get them involved much earlier in the process and not just when it's finished and see if it works.
Yeah, and I think I understand why people do that, right? Because they get so excited about the new capabilities of these AI models, and every time there's a new release of a model with new capabilities, and so the engineers, they say, hey, this is a great opportunity for us, and then you want to be the first to market again. But again, then the risk is that you forget a little bit about the whole value creation process also from a consumer point of view.
Yeah, and I know these customer panels often look at the customer experience and not necessarily at the ethics behind. It's sort of like, okay, I would like to change the color, or this should be a male or a female voice if it's voice active.
I think it can actually be a sort of a competitive advantage. If you do this very well and you communicate this well to your consumers, then I think it can be a benefit for your company rather than something that you a drawback.
It's definitely a type of quality that you're offering and making sure that it's safe to use.
I think it fits well also with the broader sustainability movement, right? That you want to do things ethically right rather than just selling stuff that people don't need and that is bad for the environment and so on. So I think this is in some sense a bit similar, that you take the well-being always center point for consumers.
So did you experiment with the commercial chatbots in your domain to see how how safe they are?
I did. And I think often indeed what I see there is that they took the leap first to introduce something quickly. For instance, a famous example is of Catholic Answers in the United States. They had launched an avatar chatbot, but they had to take it offline again, I think within a week or 2 weeks, primarily because, people got confused about the anthropomorphic design. So that basically meant that they used an individual that was dressed as a priest rather than as a bot. So then you get like a distinction between what is the function of a priest versus the role of an AI chatbot, right? If you need to separate these very clearly, and I think even in the AI Act, this is mandatory for these sensitive domains like religion. But again, so this is an example where people maybe too quickly introduce something without carefully considering all the possible consequences and risks. And then you have a bit of reputational damage because you need to take it offline again after launching this with a lot of attention.
A question from the audience. So you also sometimes have these privacy watchdogs. So should we then also start having a customer panel is within the organization type of body? Would a ethics or ethical AI or ethical chatbot watchdog be a solution? Then you have a group of experts who can test this, and there can be a complaint. This chatbot is.
So you
but we've
more
seen
like
cases still commit suicide, and that's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
I know in the Netherlands the Autoriteit Persoonsgegevens, so the organization that is responsible for the privacy watchdog authority, they are also responsible for overseeing the AI Act and the responsible use of AI. The challenges that they have, not enough people. So then that's another question. So I'd say it's logical, but I also see, and I'm curious to see how you see that for digital safeguarding, but I also see the risk of taking ethics as being privacy, whilst it constitutes of a lot more.
Right, so how you store the data, that falls under the GDPR. Right? So that's not entirely the same as the AI Act. And so I think things like data minimization and secure data storage, having like only certain people being able to access the data, and those are slightly different things. So these are also things that need to be checked and that are part basically of the safeguarding policy, but they're only a subcomponent, I would say, of the overall.
It's all on the input side, and here you also want to have safeguards on the output side. What's being generated. That's not data, that's...
But that's always hard in a stochastic system, right? To have full control over that. You can try to do it as best as you can, but I think there are always some slight residual risks. And so therefore, it's also important that you communicate actively with your users. So the part that I mentioned before about empowerment, that they basically know what to do when they get inappropriate output, that they know what the capabilities and the limitations are of these AI systems, the helplines. So we basically have a list also of helplines that they can contact per country in case they encounter some, say, things that they don't like. And of course, they can also provide feedback on the platform. So this user empowerment part is another important component, I would say, if for some reason there are these residual risks.
Good. Let me see if there are other questions remaining. No, then thank you both for this very insightful discussion. Fun to have you here on the table. Good to see our alumni returning. Then what I would like to do is say a bit about our new online program, which is a 2-year program where students can fully online in their own time and pacing engage in what I think is an engaging platform. We usually teach for twice 45 minutes here on campus. We are not imposing that on our online students. We really make this tailor-made. All content is created with the purpose of being engaging both in terms of videos, but also a lot of small activities online that you help process all the materials. So in this program, it also aims to what we were talking about, create the knowledge where you learn to talk to both marketers and data scientists. So you learn about methods, about techniques, what their limitations are, and to see where they, how technical challenges can be solved by marketeers or by changing the marketing problem, but also marketeers can provide insights into the types of questions that they are interested in, and data scientists can answer them. The build-up of the program is that we start with a lot of insights. You get a deep dive into both marketing strategy and in machine learning. And then in the second year, there are courses on personalization, on customer experience, on channel management. But also the final module is really a future vision, but also about the context. So how do you bring your method, your insights, feeding into marketing, also towards the future, and how do you deal with all the stakeholders that are in place there? And this ethical debate that we have been having here today really is a key component of making sure that you as an organization will survive in the domain of ethical scrutiny, of responsible entrepreneurship, and just be a good company that you as an individual are also happy to work with. Let me give a final check. No. So then, thank you all for watching. The final slide will provide you a link where you can find more information, and we look forward to having you next time. Thank you.